we have over 100 years experience, in the clean and brush space, right? Because our team is focused on that. And you're right, the education. So we have a certified education program that through HSPA and CBSPD, that was one of the very first things I did. And it's only on cleaning brushes, right? I know there's a lot of good education on the market. A lot of people do education. Ours is 100% just about cleaning brushes based on how they're manufactured and for design of use.
Rising above the buzz of ultrasonic cleaners and the clanking of stainless steel are the ideas and voices that are changing an industry. You're listening to the Beyond Clean podcast, the central nexus for the people, processes, and products that are improving our sterile processing world. Each week, we speak with frontline technicians, CEOs, engineers, and entrepreneurs with a common goal to help you fight dirty. Every instrument, every time. Whether you are tuning in for education or inspiration, we're glad you did. Now turn on those washers and turn up the volume. It's time to go beyond clean.
On this vendor spotlight, we speak with Dan DeShane, sterile processing leader at Sharn by Marketlab. We are going to be talking today about brushes and the importance and value of providing brush education, brush specific education. So if you haven't had an education solely dedicated to brushes in your department, this conversation is going to be for you. There's brushes been around for quite a long time, but has there really been a great deal of innovation? And when there has been innovation, how has that helped us maintain an efficient process in our departments for selecting the right brush for the right job? So Dan is going to be talking to us today about creating efficiencies, establishing standardization, streamlining, and organizing how you use cleaning brushes every single day in your department. And Dan and I have known each other for quite a while, over a decade. So this is going to be a fun one. It's great to reconnect with an old friend and coworker. We're going to be right back with Dan DeShane, sterile processing leader at Sharn by Marketlab.
From 17 Studios, you're listening to Beyond Clean, the global voice of sterile processing.
Joining me now is Dan DeShane, sterile processing leader with Sharn by Marketlab. We're going to be talking about the Sharn Select brush line today, Dan. And you and I, we go back, I'd say well over a decade, almost 15 years now. I've known you for quite a while. It's your first appearance here on Beyond Clean, and I'm really happy you're joining us. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Justin. I'm glad I'm actually here. It took a little time to get here as well, but I'm excited. Our company's super excited about, partnering up with you guys and being able to, let me talk for a little bit about something we're pretty passionate about.
Well, you literally know me from the very beginning of my vendor days. Obviously worked as a nurse for many years, but when I went to the dark side, as all my nursing colleagues like to say, I worked for a company where you worked. That was the first time I kind of got out of scrubs, so to speak, and into a suit. And obviously education was a big focus at that time. And it's something that's carried with me as we've created Beyond Clean and this platform ever since. But I know you really well. The audience may not. Why don't you take a couple of minutes here and just talk about your years of experience and specifically related to instrument brushes and sterile processing?
Yeah, thanks. And you're right. I mean, we both started in the company. When I started in medical too, I started in Spectrum Surgical, right? And Rick Schultz, who really in a lot of ways revolutionized and, not just brushes, but education for sterile processing. He's been one of the biggest, proponents for doing that. And I think you and I both got that passion and heard it from him on a daily basis, right? I mean, something we still say, and I think people probably get sick of me saying, is something he said to me when we first first started. If it's not clean, it can't be sterile, right? We lived that mantra for many, many years. And, I thank Rick for that. So I started with Spectrum Surgical almost 19 years ago now, when we were a very small, regionally based company. I think I was employee number 26, 27, somewhere in that, right? And then, we were acquired by Steris, Spectrum was, and I spent a good amount of time at Steris and enjoyed my time there. I was the director of products for the IMS division, and, spent multiple years working with cleaning brushes. But yeah, I've been selling cleaning brushes for 19 years. And, the innovation that was brought to that marketplace way back when, and, Rick was a big part of that, is, taking brushes and actually driving them into sterile processing where they were, to some extent not used before 40 years ago. So it's really still a passion of mine. Rick drove it home for us, and I enjoy it a lot.
He did a great job of creating educators who had a high level of competency and expectation around understanding, the challenges that are in sterile processing. I'm grateful for that too. You might not remember this, but after my very first week of orientation, I was on my drive home from our offices on my way back to central Pennsylvania. And I met up with you at an account you had in the Pittsburgh area. And you actually showed me a program that you had set up for managing consignment with brush inventory. And so I also want to highlight the fact that you have a lot of experience in providing a good deal of value and support for the customers, and especially as it relates to brushes, was something that I thought you did a really good job of, is just having that ownership over the program and providing that customer service, that support, and that value. So I think that, along with education, is so critically important today, because look at staffing issues. It's a challenge for departments out there, and they're looking for more from their vendors.
Yeah. Again, the consignment program the concept was great, right? It was hey, we know you need these. And back then, that concept originally started because most people didn't have brushes, or they didn't have enough brushes, right? They didn't know. They were learning how to use their brushes. So the concept behind consignments was originally good, right? But to your point is, we always have to continue innovating, especially in this space. So yeah, we're spending a lot of time. I spend a lot of my time. How do we make this world of brushes better? Because it's this is a trade, right? We don't often treat, sterile processing techs as tradespeople, right? But it's just like a carpenter or a plumber or somebody else. This is a specific job, very hard to do job with specific tasks. If you've ever tried to build your own deck and you don't have the right equipment to do it, you struggle. And that's the same world in sterile processing. So that's why I think innovating and looking at these best way to put the right brushes in people's hands all the time is really paramount to what we do.
Brushes are like the most important tool you can have to effectively clean an instrument. And yet, in a lot of cases, it does kind of go to the wayside, or people aren't necessarily focused on it as much as they're focused on the actual instruments and then getting the right brush. And we're going to dive into all that. But you talked about innovation, and I think this is a great time to bring up Sharn by Marketlab and kind of the background of the company and what you're doing, maybe to set up the conversation around continuing to innovate in all those areas that you just alluded to a moment ago.
Yeah. So our line, and then Marketlab as a whole, our Sharn brand, by Marketlab, we're really designing it, and Marketlab's taken a big step with us, right? We were dabbling in the brush business for many years, did some international distribution, but, really they brought me here to do one simple thing. How do we make this better? Right? How do we not just stop with, hey, here's the same brush we've been using for years, right? I think you laughed at me one time. I gave you the whole story about the M16 brush, right? And I was talking to some of our people this week here in our corporate offices about that. And I explained to them, I'm like, well, you know why that brush had that part number? I'm like, no, we just thought it was a part number. I go, that brush came from the industry of cleaning guns. It was an M16 brush designed for cleaning M16 guns. Our brush space started like that, right? They found brushes that were designed for cleaning other things, and they brought them into our space. Well, today, our world of instrumentation is so complex. We actually have to design brushes and design things and be innovative to make that better for people. Because, ultimately you can't use a brush, that was only created to clean a gun to clean your surgical instruments. And if that's the only world we live in, we're missing the boat. And you just said it. We got to have the right tools because it's vital.
Innovation and specialization without too much complexity that it becomes difficult to manage. I think there is a great deal of opportunity there. I also want to mention, Sharn by Marketlab might be new to our audience, but the company itself is not new to this industry. Can you talk about the years of experience?
Yeah. So, Sharn by Marketlab's been in the business for 30 years. Actually, Sharn started, before Marketlab purchased them as an international distributor of brushes, actually for Spectrum Surgical some many years ago. And so we've been in the space. We know it well, but Marketlab has been a market leader in the lab space, Sharn and anesthesia. So we're not new to hospitals. Anybody that's out there, they would, look in their system. They're going to see the Marketlab name, the Sharn name and brand in their system, from Bowman to Cone to all these brands that are part of our family here. There's a lot of us. And so we're not new to the healthcare space or the hospital space, but a lot of people in SPD domestically in the US here wouldn't have heard of us maybe. That's been some of our challenges, right? How do we get the word out? Thankfully, we got, good friends and partners like you guys that can help us do a little bit of that work. But, that's our goal, is we offer a different avenue for you than what you might have had traditionally in the past. But we're still a company that has proven success in providing products to people.
You also mentioned that team. And so I know that education is a major driver for you. In any capacity, any role that you've had, education just has a great deal of emphasis. And I think we're aligned really well between the Beyond Clean and the Sharn by Marketlab companies that way, in terms of how we view the way that we can support this industry and continuous education and innovation, obviously. But how much experience do you have on your team specifically in sterile processing? You just mentioned, all these other areas, but I know you're really building up a strong team there specifically to support the brush program.
Yeah. So today, my team in itself that actually is driven to driving this. Obviously, we have many people in our company that help, sell and do all that stuff. But my team that drives the education, the innovation, all of that, we have over 100 years experience, in the clean and brush space, right? Because our team is focused on that. And you're right, the education. So we have a certified education program that through HSPA and CBSPD, that was one of the very first things I did. And it's only on cleaning brushes, right? I know there's a lot of good education on the market. A lot of people do education. Ours is 100% just about cleaning brushes based on how they're manufactured and for design of use. So we spend a lot of that. But, it's probably the 5th or 6th education program at this point that I've built, through this kind of, process in, using HSPA or using, some other companies to certify our education. So, but we're excited about it. You're right. It is a slight passion of mine and our team. And I think I get some ribbing every now and again from our people inside that I'd spend more time educating than I would selling if I had the choice at times. But I think it's vital. It might seem like a simple tool, but brushes are so vitally important to what we do in the operating room and elsewhere to make sure we're, if it's not clean, it can't be sterile. Thanks, Rick.
Yeah. And I'll tell you too, I've gone on other podcasts. I don't just host podcasts. Sometimes I'm a guest on them. And I did one recently just about, how do vendors differentiate themselves? And I think education and being a resource is one of the best ways to set yourself apart from your competition. What's also really interesting to me about what you just said was how you've created these educational programs that are specifically focused on brushes. I feel like in the past, they've kind of been a throw-in topic when you're maybe getting a presentation on the care and handling of surgical instruments, but I can't think of any program I've ever seen that, has a full CE attached to it that is just specifically around brushes. And yet I think it is obvious to everybody who works in the industry that there's a lot of opportunity to educate around brushes. So I really like your mission to have that targeted component. And the other thing that we've learned is especially as we've championed education for sterile processing, that means there's been a whole influx of education in lots of new and creative ways. And the thing that we always talk about too here at Beyond Clean is how do you get really granular with that education? Instead of being really broad sweeping, how do you point out the nuances in the industry? And obviously the only way you're going to do that with brushes is to create a program that is dedicated to brushes. How did you fill an hour CE? Talk to me a little bit about really putting those programs together.
Well, I mean, so that's the funny thing is, right? It's such a simplistic product line, but it really isn't, right? So, I get questions all the time, like, right, how do we throw away our brushes? When do we throw them away? And, regulatory has done a decent job of giving us some stances on that. But it's, stainless steel brushes, right? People fear stainless steel brushes and they're like, well, it's going to damage my instrument. Well, I have studies that show it isn't, right? But the point is understanding why people have that fear, right? So years and years ago, there was a thing called orthopedic bone brushes that were stainless steel. And so as we were building sterile processing marketplace or building sterile processing, right? When they started to move out of the operating room into a sterile processing department, brushes like that made their way into a sterile processing department. Well, that was a heavier grade stainless steel, right? It would damage your surgical instruments. It wasn't designed for cleaning them. Whereas today, the brushes we sell in that space are designed for cleaning, right? It's a softer steel. But we could look at really digging into how these brushes were manufactured. Again, to your point earlier is, are they designed for specific devices? Are there specialty things? How do we make your life easier with putting the right tool in your hand? And so there was really, I think my team would laugh and say I could put together a 2 or 3 hour presentation on brushes and manufacturing that would probably bore everybody. And I've been called a brush geek at times and other things, but I think it's vital. I mean, we got to look deep into this because our industry has changed. Right? How much more complex are our instruments today than they were 30 years ago? If we don't change our number one tool for cleaning the most important things we're going to touch all day long, we're not keeping up with that innovation that's going on in the surgical instrument and medical device world.
100%. And there are so many examples of when new products come to market that then run through sterile processing. Everybody's like, where's the IFU? Wait, how realistic is this? Can I actually perform this? So you're correct. In many cases, more products need to be developed just to be able to support the new innovation, and brushes are not alone in that conversation. There's a couple of themes that are playing out even in this early conversation on this podcast today, but education, obviously a strong one, but innovation we brought up a couple of different times. And you just alluded to it again, the importance of continuing to innovate and keep up with the evolution of medical devices and new ones that are coming onto the market, but also what you're learning just from the existing product lines that are out there. How would you describe innovation maybe over the last 20 or 30 years and even the state of innovating around surgical instrument brushes today? Where did you see opportunity, and what do you think is kind of the current state? How are people focusing on innovating in this space?
So I think the original people that started to come up with sterile processing brushes, right? We talked about Rick a few times, and Rick was one of the original innovators on brushes, but he started Spectrum Surgical over 30 years ago, right? And he's moved on, right? Some of the other competitors in the marketplace, some of the original people that got and started bringing brushes into sterile processing, they're not in the industry anymore, right? They've moved on, they've retired. And so what I think what happened was, and I understand why, right? If you look at a brush, I mean, I had this conversation with many people, I talk to my friends and family and they say, you sell brushes? And I'm like, yes, cleaning brushes. And they're like, wow, that is really cool. I thought you were better at medical, something, thinking that I'm like, well, this is an important space, but a lot of our people don't understand how important they are, right? So what I think has happened over the years is that innovation stopped. They just looked, well, we have 500 brushes in the marketplace today, right?
Right.
Well, the innovation
to a world without brushes, this is a huge improvement. It's even hard for me to think about that. There was actually sterile processing without brushes at one time. It's almost shocking to think about.
You got to look at the advent of our industry, right? How has sterile processing changed, right? So the innovation came in the terms of, all right, well, we're just going to make 5,000 different types of brushes and give you that choice. Well, the problem is if you don't train people on what those were made for, or why did you come up with a different size that is virtually the exact same size as everything else? We've tried to then take this and make it perfect. And you know what happens when you try and make things completely perfect over and over again and you never get there? You keep on adding things to that perfection and then you just make it worse. So I think a lot of our innovation is around understanding the devices we're cleaning and giving you more simplistic ways to choose the best type of brush. So, there's plenty of brushes on the market. And yes, we are finding new ones that we can do different things with, but it's also taking some of the old stuff and condensing it down and simplifying that confusion, because there is a lot of confusion when we walk into hospitals and do our education. Lots and lots of people are confused on how to choose the right brush or why they're choosing that brush.
Yeah, I think they use the wrong brush quite often. Like you said, there's an opportunity here to be a lot more efficient in that selection process. There's a lot of demands on sterile processing to turn sets around. And so having some misunderstanding or not knowing which brush to choose is tough. And at the end, like I said before, surgical site infections, it's hard to imagine a world without brushes, because if you can't properly clean an instrument if it's not clean, it can't be sterile point, then there's going to be a strong link to a surgical site infection. Improperly cleaned instruments, period, the end. This is the best tool for that. And so everything you're saying is important, but now it's like that next level is how do we make sure we're using the correct brush for the job that we're doing? And so to your point, having so many options to choose from, especially with newer staff coming into a department all the time, how do you keep them on target with making the right choice?
Yeah. We live by a simple mantra on that front, right? Standardize, simplify, and educate. That's what we do with our brushes, right? We don't want 4 people using 4 different brushes, half of them the wrong size, to clean the same item, right? We don't want one person in your department teaching 2 people to clean this way and then 4 people teaching somebody else, because again, you just said it. We have a lot of turnover in this world right now. Post-COVID, people that didn't come back into the space. We got a lot of younger, newer people. Education became, we weren't doing field education. We spend time in the hospitals. We want to work with you. Hey, I'm coming to work at your sink. I'm going to be at your sink with you, helping you with those brushes. And that's what my team is doing, right? That's what my team is here to do. But yes, standardize, simplify, educate, because the number one reported incidents out of the operating room today, as it has been for the longest time, is a dirty medical device. Finding a dirty device in the field. And we all know that that is the worst case scenario, because anything that would have touched, that tray or anything else, everything now is contaminated. So now, case delays, patient problems, right? All of that stuff we run into, whereas this is a front end problem. The way we solve surgical site infections in the sense of dirty instrumentation is front end. We clean them better. We give you better tools to do that, because it's a super hard job working that sink. It's not easy. We all know it.
Decon is not most people's favorite area to be, right? Let's be honest on that one. There are some out there, and Hank always reminds us there are definitely some people who just would spend the whole day in decon and it goes by really fast. But I'd say most people kind of dread that assignment. And so, making it more difficult or having a more difficult or less consistent standardized process just doesn't make anybody want to be there anymore. But it is such a critical job. It's the most proactive thing you can do to prevent surgical site infections. And you talked about the service piece. We've emphasized standardization and education, but I feel like this is something that is part of how you're innovating how you service the industry in this regard. So you educate as part of that service. So what does that look like? Are you going on site to provide a service? It's a product. So, if you're not actually delivering, we obviously had experience in repair, right? So if somebody has to come on site and do repair, but somebody doesn't have to come on site for a sterile processing team to use a brush. So how have you innovated service?
Well, see, I kind of disagree with that. I think we do need to come on site to be able to, so somebody can see that brush and understand how it's used. Because you might look at that tool as simple, right? And how do brushes make it in the hands of a technician most time, right? somebody's talking to an SPD manager or supply chain person. They say, oh, I have all these new brushes, or I have this. Well, they give them to them. They give them a bunch of samples, or they say, okay, go out. They go to the technician. The technician has got no information on why they're even having this conversation or why they might need a change. We don't want to work that way. That technician, and again, I'm hopefully helping the SPD managers, the directors, and the supply chain people, is because if we have that conversation with the technician at point of use, where they're at, and we can get their feedback and hear them, that's going to help us, one, innovate. Two, it's going to help us standardize so we can make their world easier. We know the brushes they need based on what they're cleaning, right? So it's not difficult. It's taking the time, the work, and the effort to get out there and do that with these people. And that's really what our goal is, right? How can I spend more time?
You're not just selling a product. You're really consulting with the department to create that efficiency.
Yeah. I mean, hey, there's cost components to everything, right? And I mean, we all live in the real world, right? I mean, this would be great. And if I'm charging for all of this, right? If I'm the most expensive brush on the market, but I'm telling you, I'm doing all this, stuff. But no, this is in our normal process. We're not overcharging people. We're not charging more for this. This is what we see as our sales process, right? So in selling and getting in with customers means we understand what they need. How are you going to stay and keep on buying from me for years on end? It's because I'm providing you that service level that you need to help. Because it's funny, we were just in meetings this week, and I was talking with some of our sales folks, and I said, listen, everything you do, every time you walk in the door, this is a patient safety thing we're talking about. It's a family member. It's somebody else on that table that this is patient safety driven. If we're not looking at our brush program to help with that, we're missing the boat, and we're not doing our customers, the right service.
Yeah, really getting connected with the mission. And, sometimes that's even difficult for sterile processing technicians. That's why I love hearing and training when they go to the operating room and observe some procedures as just part of the onboarding process to understand how connected they are. But then you bring it over to the vendor population, and there are lots of vendor representatives who support the OR and get it, right? They're procedure reps. But then there's this whole other population of supplier representatives that don't necessarily go into the OR. I love how you're connecting your team to the mission and why it's important, and why what they do to support these hospitals is so important. And so I can definitely hear how you've innovated on the service side. What are some actual innovations related to the brushes themselves that you've been working on?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's funny. When we first started this project, we started really digging into this. I went out to a UPMC facility, right? And, they were having an issue with getting burn-on tissue on some robotics and laparoscopic, and they were struggling with that. And the brushes on the marketplace just weren't doing the job for what they wanted. And I got it. I mean, I understand. I mean, we talk about stainless steel. Well, stainless steel is a great tool used correctly, but it should never be used on coated or insulated items, right? It can do damage. We can arcing and thermal burning if you put a pinhole in a lap instrument, right? We know these issues, and we can train to these too. Hey, this is why you don't use this brush in this scenario. But they came to me and they said, hey, we need a solution. Well, we sat down. It wasn't overly complicated, but we came up with the right brush for doing those jobs. And, it's actually fastly become our number one selling brush because it targets those problem areas on instruments, and we can go after that. And that's, so again, kind of going back, is we're looking at the instruments today, right? When I started in this industry, we didn't really have take apart lap instruments. They were just starting to introduce them, right? So 75% of all of the devices somebody in sterile processing is going to pick up today is either cannulated or complex, right? We didn't have take apart lap instruments. The length of a brush, was different back then because you didn't have, on average lap instruments, 33 centimeters long, right? So is that brush exiting out completely? So we dig into the way they were manufactured, why they were manufactured. But then, yes, we can devise brushes that just work better for you. But again, if I'm not in the field talking to these people or understanding and hearing their problems, I can't solve that one.
Yeah. What about color-coded wire cannula brushes? What can you tell me about that? Because that's a key feature you were talking to me about the other day.
Yeah. So again, this goes back to the Spectrum days. Rich Schultz really looked at this, and it was originally for identification, right? And we're not too far off of that now, but the design was, hey, this is a 5mm brush. Here's, the red bead that goes through the black bead, that goes with that. And it's on the ring handle. And the funny thing is I always love people going, oh, they made that ring handle so they could put a bead on it. That's not actually why a ring handle was made. You take a long piece of wire, you fold it over, you twist it. You got to have an open end, because you can't just twist it closed. It's actually in the natural process of making wire twisted, but it does put a nice little place for a bead to go on there, right? But what we find today is, again, getting into that standardization, we can use these color code beads to help customers understand the best brushes for the device they're cleaning. So you can really then say, okay, I need a red bead for this, a green bead for that, and we can help chart that out. And we'll help you get to that point where, again, you have a lot of new people walking into the department. How do we train them properly? How do we get the entire staff doing that same process? Well, if we color code systems and make it easier for their selection, standardize, simplify, educate. It all flows together. And our products have to mirror that mindset.
I feel like the simplify piece comes back to the way that you're consulting with the departments, right? Because it's not one brush fits all, just like, one brush package doesn't fit every customer. You're actually understanding, I believe, if I'm understanding you correctly, you're getting an understanding of the inventory and then saying, here's what you need to purchase to be able to not purchase everything for, every possible bead size that may or may not be applicable, but actually saying this is what you actually need to be able to do the job based on your unique inventory versus any other customer across the country. And am I correct about that?
Oh, yeah. No, you're right. I mean, and again, we learned this in the repair business a long time ago, right? No two customers are alike, right? We all have a lot of the exact same instruments. Your facilities are different. Your flow is different. Your surgical caseload is different.
Even the space, so we need to and the tools in the department, like the equipment.
Absolutely.
That you have.
Yeah. So we need to understand all of that to give you a good program, right? It's not buying brushes out of a catalog. It's a program. And you got to do that because we have so many new people in this space that need that help. And, that's what all of it is. It's a program. It's designed to make this easier and better for selection, and using tools like color code systems to do that.
So I know you have plans to continue innovating. So I would just say everybody should be following Sharn by Marketlab to get updates on new innovation. So that's a little bit of a teaser. Just be paying attention out there, everybody. And, but also there's also just the ergonomics, right? This is like back to the basics even, this is repetitive motion when you're cleaning with brushes. And we know that there are injuries that are associated with repetitive motion. And it's been a big focus, but how much do people really talk about it related to brushes? I hear about it for surgeons and drills and all kinds of different innovations on medical devices, but I don't really hear people talking about that as it comes to brushes. And seriously, the repetitive motion for cleaning with brushes is probably one of the most repetitive motions you're going to do in sterile processing.
And it's a hard job, right? Where do you clean? Where do you clean with your brushes? Underwater, right? It's not above water. You're bent over a heavy sink, right? One of the things we do in our education or when we start talking with, people is I'll sit in a room with 100 people and say, hey, everybody wave to me. Put your hands up and wave at me, right? Good morning, right? And have them waving. And I tell them, all right, now keep your hand up. Now look to the person to your right or left, right? Are your hands the same? No. When I started in this industry, we had less people in this space, right? Sterile processing has expanded exponentially every year. More people in, more diversity of people coming in. So we all have different size hands. If I give you one tiny little brush and tell you to go out and, hopefully you're not having to scrub down a bookwater retractor system, hoping they're wiping it down before it makes it to you. But I give you this little brush and ask you to clean a really large device and you got a really big hand, 30 minutes under that water, you're cussing at me, right? You're yelling at me, because your hand hurts. And so we all know in any walk of life or in anything you're doing, if you have a right tool and you're moving quickly through it, you do a better job. right? We speed up, efficiency is a big thing in this, but having the right tools and what fits your hand versus what fits the device you're cleaning. And that's where we live in the world of ergonomics when it comes down to what we're cleaning. That external cleaning, we need what fits in your hand, or we got to look at that device as that's a really big device. I need a bigger brush, right? But if they don't have that tool at their workstation, that sink, it's not going to do them any good. They're going to grab whatever they have because they're too busy to go run around, grab things. So there's a lot of that workstation setup and all that. It comes in to filling in things like ergonomics for what you're cleaning.
Yeah. And if you do have that decon rock star, the last thing you want to do is have them suffer an injury. And then all of a sudden it's just that much more demand on the rest of the team, to carry the load in decon. So
we were just at a hospital out in California and we were observing and helping out what was going on. Those rock stars, right? The guy pulled off his PPE and everything else. He's sweating head to toe. And we know these people that do this, right? But there's in our space, there's those people, right? He said that was the third pair of scrubs that he sweated through that day because they had such a heavy caseload. But I don't think we appreciate those people enough. They don't see, you don't know how those people hard they work in decontam until you go spend that time. And there's so many of those decontam heroes out there. We need to recognize them more often.
Yeah, and we definitely don't want them getting hurt. That's for sure.
No, absolutely not.
So I want you to just give me, I know we're getting close to the end here, but I would love to just hear an example of maybe some specific recommendations that you've made, maybe at a customer assessment, and then you're going through that specifically around specialty brushes, because I think that's where a lot of the confusion does come, right? It's not the standard brushes and the use. Once you've had some time in SPD, you get a pretty good grip on that. But the mix of specialty brushes, which ones to use when, maybe you can tell us a kind of a story about that.
Yeah. So, I've been in many departments, right? And we have this crazy brush that's been around for a very long time called an acetabular reamer brush. It's not new, but we walk in with it and people go, wow, that's a weird looking brush. What is that used for? I'm like, well, it's not a new one, but if you've ever tried to clean an acetabular reamer, and we teach, it's really simple, right? Round brushes clean round areas, flat brushes clean flat areas. It's not rocket science. But if you don't have a proper brush, right? So the acetabular reamer brush is a great one. And when we give it to people, we start trialing it and they start using it, it's eye opening, right? The skies are parted, right? The sun's shining through, but again, it's putting that right tool in their hands. They've been struggling with this forever, right? Getting a good brush for cleaning Da Vinci cannulas. They're very difficult. Some of that stuff where it gets in. We talked about, the robotics brush, right? For cleaning robotic and laparoscopic jaws. What we found is that brush tend to migrate over into a million other things. And it's one of our most affordable brushes on the marketplace today, but it's a multi-use brush. So what we find is a lot of these specialty ones that can change that dynamic of how hard they're working to clean something just with an easier tool that is designed to help them with that specific task. And we do a lot of that. I talk a lot about stainless steel and other things, but there are good brushes out there that aren't stainless steel. And the better thing is we don't have it. Let's talk about it. I love creating new brushes. It's fun, right? It's fun to solve that problem. And if I don't know what it is, and there are things obviously that I don't know how to clean as well as other people, if you can show me what you're doing, I might be able to come up with an idea on how you can better clean and, find that brush or make the brush.
Yeah, you're really committed to innovation and efficiency, as well as the education that has to accompany that to really leverage the innovation. But I love that. And I would just point everybody in your direction. Like maybe they're listening to this right now and they've got some ideas. Oh, I've always said, I wish we had a brush that was like this. Or, I used to work in this other industry and we had to clean something and we used a brush like this. I think this would really work, in a similar design, but specific for healthcare. So I'm going to send them your direction. They can contact you at Sharn, SPD at marketlab.com. So Sharn is SHARN, SPD at marketlab.com. And also you can send that email over there and possibly win a lunch with your department on Dan and his team, and an in-person or a webinar continued education session. So make sure that you mention that you heard about Sharn by Marketlab here on the Beyond Clean podcast when you send that email over to connect with Dan and his team. And Dan, honestly, really engaging interview today. I've seen you at work, so I know how committed you are to education and service. I'm not surprised to hear that story about everybody around you knowing that you would educate for a living, because I know how passionate you are about all that. Is there anything you would add? Like, do we miss anything in this conversation that, might be really important for our listeners to know?
Well, the good news is nobody's throwing anything at me. So, to stop talking for days and days and days about cleaning brushes. But no, I would just say, I don't think there's a lot in this space, right? And I think if anything, I want to always let people understand is it's not, crazy. It's not hard to do this, right? We can take steps to make this space better for you. And I don't think there's a lot of great opportunity for us to get better in the sterile processing space, but I also think we've made huge strides since I've been in the industry. And, over 19 years, I've seen drastic changes in this space, and it's exciting, right? It's all good stuff. We have so many people passionate in this space, whereas I think it was just an afterthought, 20 years ago. Today, there's so many good people that want to do the things like what we're talking about. So that's just, it still gets me excited, right? I still get pumped up that, there's so many good people in this space. And, like you guys, I mean, what you guys are doing is it's changed the game, right? It gets people talking. And I think the more we talk about our issues, that's the only way we're ever going to solve them.
Well, your team of experts are 100% laser focused on brushes, and I absolutely love that. So email sharnspd@marketlab.com. You can also follow Sharn by Marketlab on LinkedIn, or visit sharn.com/SPD for more information about the brush evaluation program, which is really when Dan and his team come in and consult with you to help create a much more efficient selection process and make sure that you're ordering exactly what you need based on the mix of instruments that you have flowing through your department. Dan, great job today. Thanks so much for coming on.
No, hey, it was great to talk. I always enjoy talking with you, Justin. Most days.
Most days. Yeah. I'll tell you what, we've done a pretty good job of staying in touch over the years. And
yes, we have.
it's great to see you leading a team that's really doing something very different and unique in this space. And I'm not only happy for you, I'm proud of you, Dan.
Well, thank you. And hey, I love Beyond Clean. So, what you and Hank have built is awesome to me, because again, you guys are some of the game changers that I'm talking about in this industry.
Thank you for that. That was Dan DeShane, sterile processing leader with Sharn by Marketlab. And I think everybody knows how much we value education and also driving efficiencies in your department. But I love this consultative approach that Dan and his team take towards really streamlining and creating efficiencies for how you use your cleaning brushes in your facilities every single day, and really customizing what your orders are going to be and what brushes you use in your department specific to the types of instruments that you have. I do want to remind everybody they've got a little bit of a promotion. If you email them at sharnspd@marketlab.com, you can be entered to win a lunch with your department on them. And that would either be done along with an in-person education or webinar that'll be CE approved. And just mention that you heard about it all here on the Beyond Clean podcast when you reach out to them. You can also follow Sharn by Marketlab on LinkedIn and visit sharn.com/SPD for more information about the brush evaluation program. Just want to thank Dan so much for lending his insights today, and also just taking such a focused approach to how we innovate and educate on cleaning brushes in sterile processing. So thanks again, Dan. That's going to do it for this vendor spotlight here on Beyond Clean. I do want to remind everybody that the best way to listen to our podcast is to download our smartphone app for iPhone and Android. Simply search for the Beyond Clean podcast. A heartfelt thank you to everybody for tuning in. And I also just want to encourage all of you to make sure that you are following us on LinkedIn and Facebook, but more importantly, that you're commenting on our posts. If there's something that you learned during this episode or another episode, we want to hear from you. And if there was one that really hit home, make sure you share it out with your colleagues on social media. You can also email us at info@beyondclean.net. And I do want to thank everybody for listening to this vendor spotlight on Beyond Clean.